Hello, and welcome to this issue of the Coffee with the Editor. And I'm Charles Brennan, the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Food Science and Technology. And with me today, I've got Professor Jeremy Hill from Fonterra and also from the Ridditt Institute at Massey University. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Kia ora.
And you're got a research paper out talking about reflections of the dairy industry as a whole. So I suppose the simple question to start off is why is the dairy industry interesting? What has interested you for the last few years in the dairy industry?
Yeah, so that in researching a little of the background for the paper, I discovered there's hundreds of thousands of papers being published in with the topic of dairy science and technology, on the topic of dairy science and technology. And when I entered the dairy industry, which was over 30 years ago, one could ask oneself whether there was anything left to be done, given there'd been so much that had been done. But of course, with advances in other disciplines, there's always new opportunities created. And the dairy sector is one of the most advanced sectors in terms of the application of science and technology to food. And that's all the way from, if you want, the production of the primary biomass, which is the milk, and then the processing of that into an array of ingredients. And people are always astounded at how many ingredients are produced from milk and how many different foods you'd find those ingredients in. And that's really attributed to both the nutritional and functional characteristics of dairy ingredients and what they can be used for, either in dairy products themselves or as ingredients in other foods. So the protein, for example, in milk is not only very nutritious, it's the gold standard really for nutrition, but it's also extremely functional in terms of its different properties, its heat stability, its gelation properties, its emulsification properties, those sort of things that enable you to create a wide variety of ingredients from it. I mean, the company I work for has thousands of them. People are always astounded. That many ingredients.
You go through the list of products from Fonterra, and there are other milk companies available in the world, but you go through the ingredients and the way that you've separated milk proteins and milk components and the bioactive components of milk. That's really advanced over the last 10, 15 years so much, hasn't it?
It has. So, one of the highest value ingredients that is currently extracted from milk is lactoferrin, which has got a whole array of properties. It's helps with the maturity of the gut. It's antiviral. It's antibacterial. It's an iron transporter. It's got a multifunctional benefit, and that's only present in bovine milk at 0.1 gram per liter. So, there's been quite a lot of development just on lactoferrin in the last decade, 2 decades, in terms of improving the extraction and enrichment technologies for that particular molecule. But it's not just the extraction and enrichment, it's also the way you process the dairy ingredients. That's both the fats and the proteins can impact their functionality. So it's not just the composition of the components that we produce those the particular ingredients, but it's also the way we process them that creates different functionality. So we can make whey proteins that are super functional or inert for different applications.
And I think that's fascinating, because if you think about coffee or you think about food in general, the different properties, like you're saying, the emulsification properties, the mouthfeel, the structuring of food is all down to the proteins and other components.
Yeah, one of the themes in the paper is actually food structure.
Okay.
Right. So as we understand more about nutrition and how nutrition relates to food structure rather than just composition. So how are those nutrients digested, released? How do they interact? How does that impact their absorption, etc.? then we can design better foods for particular lifestyles or life stages, because they change as well. And the example I'd give that's really quite important now is just plain old protein. As we age, we need to have a higher protein intake to drive that same sort of protein assimilation in muscles, but also the immune system is dependent on your protein. Your bone actually has quite a bit of protein in it as well. It's not just the calcium. And it's quite a dramatic increase as you go over 60 and 70. You go from requiring around 0.8 grams of high quality protein per kilogram of lean body mass to requiring 1.2. That's a 50% increase. And of course, our appetites aren't exactly the same as what they were.
No,
we can't be. So how do you create foods that are structured that still provide? I know the other point, of course, is our taste. So that still provide the sensory expectations, the sensory desires, deliver the nutrition, are easily digested, and you can put in multiple formats that people actually want to eat. Not everybody wants to just consume, high protein beverages, for example, as a means of getting your protein, although that is an important category in itself.
No, you bring in culture and gastronomy into that, and that's really complicated.
Well, it is even more so because as I'm approaching that category, I'm certainly in the former category of the over 60s, not into the 70s yet, but I don't want to compromise on my diet. I don't want to compromise on my experiences. I want my nutrition, but I still want all of the other things that I have had to date. So I think that's in general, as the aging population today is not prepared to just sit back and take whatever. They really want foods tailored to their needs.
And you talk about the population today. We've also got a real thrust in terms of sustainability. So whilst protein is really important, and protein quality and quantity, sustainability and what we're doing to the environment is at the forefront of many people's ideas. And dairy processing and dairy industry has taken a bit of a bashing regarding that, I would imagine.
We have, and it's another key area of research for myself and my team. There's an important context that's needed here as well. There's no doubt that dairy and dairy ingredients have a footprint, and it can look quite high if you don't take into account the amount of nutrition that it's coming. So whilst we need to improve our footprints, and that goes for dairy and all other foods, quite frankly, and structuring foods with lower footprints is also part of the future of the sector. Dairy provides an awful lot of nutrition, and we capture it all. So those ingredients may have some of the dairy, but other ingredients got the other parts of the dairy. So all that's going out for consumption. And although dairy's got something like accounts for something like 3% of emissions, man-made emissions, and around it's about 8% of total food biomass. But for that 8% of total food biomass, you get a very disproportional positive contribution to nutrition. So half of the nutritional calcium we consume comes from milk. Over 20% of a range of vitamins, a very high percentage of the essential amino acids, and particularly the ones that are most limiting, and on and on. In fact, in the role I have at Massey, we've built a model of the global food system, which contains 29 nutrients. Many of the models just have a few. This has 29. And of the 29 in the model, milk is in the top 5 contributors for 23 of those. No other food comes close. So whilst we need to improve the footprint, the nutrition that you get for that footprint is pretty good. And then there is an additional piece of detail that's really important. That footprint is the global average. The most efficient chains, like New Zealand and Australia to some extent, we can do the dairy footprint of those milks is a third of the global average.
So much lower,
so if you could produce, for example, Fonterra has put a lot of work into this. If you could produce all of the dairy nutrition globally, so all of that nutritional bundle I was just explaining at the same efficiency of Fonterra, you'd only have a 1% contribution, which is a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
But we should still try to improve it from there, and we've got a lot of work in that area.
So what do you think the future of dairy technology and the dairy industry is going to be looking like?
So
in the next 10, 20, 30 years?
So there's a number of things I'm very confident will be part of that picture. So one of which is sustainability. And that's not just carbon emissions, that's going to be land use, it's going to be energy use, it's going to obviously involve biodiversity and a whole raft of other environmental characteristics that we need to take into consideration. Water use and quality, obviously, very important. Then getting a better understanding of where we take that dairy nutrition, how we optimize it for different lifestyles and life stages, as I was explaining for the people in the, the over 70s requiring that extra protein punch, if you want. Then structuring foods to deliver that. So all the sensory experience, the nutritional requirements, but also the things we understand are super important: the processability, the storage stability, the safety of the food, the convenience. So a big feature these days.
And the pleasure.
And the pleasure, and last and first, the price.
Yeah, price point.
The price point becomes really important, and it's all of these, right? Now I like that because it presents a significant challenge, but for those that are prepared to step up to that challenge, a massive opportunity. And of course, you've got that food structure, lifestyles and life stages, and then we've also got to recognize that we're feeding more than just ourselves. We're feeding our microbiome as well as our own genome, and that interaction and understanding that is a big part of this picture. And the more that we study that area, the more we realize that a lot of our health and wellness characteristics are linked to those interactions. So that's another important feature that is just going to build.
And maybe that can be your follow-up paper in terms of understanding dairy ingredients and microbiome and things like that. But if you were explaining the paper that is published now to an audience, let's say to a camera, for instance, and you were trying to do that in very simple sound bites, what would your take-home message be?
Well, my simple take-home message is the global food system needs to be plant-based and animal optimized. Dairy plays a critical role in that optimization of the animal side of the nutrition. And all the evidence suggests that it will continue to do so. So whether you're a scientist or whether you're involved in the production of those foods, or even if you're a consumer of those foods, there's a huge opportunity that's coming from dairy. And I'm very, very optimistic about the future of the dairy sector on that basis.
So it'll keep us researching, both of us probably, for a long, long time to come.
Yes, and we need to make sure we're getting those 1.2 grams of protein.
Anyway, Jeremy, thank you very much. A wonderful few minutes just exploring dairy processing, dairy technology and innovation. I will have a link to Jeremy's paper at the end of this podcast. And in the meantime, we can continue our discussion and have a cup of coffee.
Thank you
very much, Jeremy.